It may seem redundant to say, but without sources, we don't have history. History is literally made from the sources we have access to. But when using these sources, it is important to note who wrote them, why they wrote them, for whom they were writing for all of these things affect what is written in these sources, and why we have to possibly not quite trust as heavily what they wrote. A popular saying, though inaccurate, is that history is written by the victors. History is actually written by whoever bothers to write it down, have their account survived and popularized, but that doesn't roll off the tongue as nicely. For the Mongol Empire, our only pro-Mongol source before 1250 is effectively the secret history of the Mongols. All the rest of our sources were written by peoples who were the victims of or lived near the Mongol invasions. And thus most of them don't have the nicest things to say about Chinggis Khan and his many children. In this video, we will have a look at a number of these sources, well, 4, and what they all have to say on a certain event. The Otrar Massacre of 1218, wherein a Mongol-sponsored trade caravan was slaughtered by the governor of the Khwarezmian town of Otrar. This was discussed in my previous video, and it effectively set off the Mongol invasion of Khwarezm and all that fun stuff. Here we'll look at the event from our 4 main sources on the matter: Ibn al-Athir, al-Nasawi, Juzjani, and Juvayni, the most famous of them all. These writers are quite important, but of rather varied backgrounds. Some wrote in Arabic, some in Persian. 3 of the 4 were contemporary to the invasion. 2 of them lived through it. One of them, al-Nasawi, was actually the secretary to the final Khwarezm Shah. Juvayni was born after the invasion of Chinggis Khan ended, but actually served in the Mongol administration in the Ilkhanate. So we run quite the gamut of views here. This provides a very interesting opportunity to compare the same event as told by 4 different authors. First, introduce the writers, then we shall discuss what they actually said about it. Our earliest writer is Ibn al-Athir, who wrote just a couple years after the invasion by Chinggis Khan. Living in Mosul, in modern-day Iraq, he was not actually an eyewitness to the invasion, but that doesn't stop his work from being ripe with just a sense of doom and gloom, and how the Mongols were an unmitigated disaster for Islam. He, interestingly enough, accuses the Caliph al-Nazir of inviting the Mongols west to attack his enemy, the Khwarezm Shah. That's probably not true. Al-Nasawi wrote his account in the 1240s, but saw quite a bit with his own eyes. He lived through the Mongol invasion in 1225. 1225, became the secretary for the final Khwarezm Shah, Jalal al-Din, the son of Shah Muhammad. He traveled alongside him, served as his embassy, and makes effort to, tells us that he makes an effort to only write about what he saw with his own eyes. But he relies quite a bit on Ibn al-Athir and writes on a whole range of stuff, but more stuff than he clearly saw himself. Both al-Nasawi and Ibn al-Athir are quite anti-Mongol. Contestant number 3, Juzjani, was originally from Gur in modern Afghanistan, but fled the Mongols in 1226 to the court of the Delhi Sultans in India. Juzjani's work is marked by just this apocalyptic dread of the Mongols. He hated the Mongols. He writes that at the moment of death, every Mongol shall descend directly to hell. Chinggis Khan's name is always followed with an epithet meaning the accursed one. Yada, yada, yada. and he saw the Mongols as an apocalyptic event heralding the end of days. He is, you might say, anti-Mongol in his bias, but also was geographically quite removed from a lot of what he was discussing, especially when he discusses events after the invasion proper. Our final author is the most famous of the four, Atamalik Juvayni, who writes this wonderful, huge description, the history of the world conqueror, he calls it. Wonderfully detailed. He wasn't born until after the invasion, though, in 1226, and actually would serve in the Mongol administration under the Ilkhanate and all that. He actually wrote about 1260, and he sees Genghis Khan's invasion as lamentable. He's not happy that the Khwarezm was so thoroughly destroyed, and so many innocent Muslims were killed. He also is giving us quite inflated numbers as well, that 1 million people were killed here in Nishapur, another 1 million in Herat, so on and so on. And he's also, much like Juvayni, seen the Mongols as an instrument of divine punishment, God's wrath, but not quite in the same terms of Juvayni, in that God's punishment can be a positive thing. Hulagu, the first Ilkhan, grandson of Genghis, is sort of presented as a holy warrior. His war against the Ismaili assassin order is described as a jihad. Things like that. And of course, being that he worked for the Mongols, we actually get quite a different spin on a lot of these same events that are presented in Ibn al-Athir through to Juvayni. So, now that we've established the biases and different backgrounds of our various authors who wrote, it should be iterated, in about a 40-year period after the invasion, we can actually look at what they said about Otrar. Surprisingly, they all give rather similar description of the events. All of them putting the blame onto Shah Muhammad and his governor of Otrar in Alchuk. In Ibn al-Athir's account, Shah Muhammad gives in Alchuk the order for the merchants to be seized and then killed, and then their confiscated property is sold in Bukhara and Samarkand. Nasawi effectively puts all the blame onto Inalchuk, not wholly surprising considering that he worked for Shah Muhammad's son. Inalchuk is overcome with greed at the sight of all the goods that the merchants carried with them, and he writes to Muhammad with trumped up charges of espionage that we have to detain them. Muhammad allows him to detain them, but Inalchuk ultimately makes the decision to kill them and thus launch the Mongol invasion. Juvayni also effectively puts all the blame onto Inalchuk. Inalchuk receives permission from Shah Muhammad, but with noted addition that he gives the Shah all of the treasures afterwards. Juvayni, it should not be surprising, provides us, among all the authors, the most detailed account, especially considering that his whole work is the most detailed out of the four of them. Juvayni notes that Inalchuk, before he became governor, Juvayni notes that Inalchuk was by this time going by the title of Qadir Khan, and sort of had dropped the name Inalchuk in, I guess, its diminutive associations. When the merchant caravan arrived at Otrar, one individual was among them who had known Inalchuk before he became governor, and before he became Qadir Khan, because this individual, I believe he's specified as an Indian actually in Juvayni, this individual continues calling Qadir Khan Inalchuk. And Inalchuk feels that this man isn't giving him the respect that he deserves in his position as governor, and how dare he call me Inalchuk, and this just infuriates him. So, again, Inalchuk makes up charges of espionage, detains them, and ultimately Shah Muhammad orders their execution. If this version is true, then it's somewhat ironic that Inalchuk has become known to posterity by the name of Inalchuk rather than his preferred title, Qadir Khan. All of the sources, despite their personal feelings to the Mongols, tell essentially the same event, blaming Muhammad and Inalchuk's greed and suspicions. The caravan of merchants, all Muslims it should be noted, are all described as innocent except for the slightly rude behavior of one individual in Juvayni's account. There's no effort to excuse the actions of the Khwarezmians or shift any blame onto the caravan, not even, you might assume, of trying to suggest that the espionage charges were legitimate, which, honestly, they probably were. Chinggis Khan relied quite a bit on Muslim merchants to be his intelligence networks. All of the sources agree. The massacre at Otrar was a crime committed by the Khwarezmian leadership, and a crime which all of the Muslim world would pay dearly for. A final note is, what does the secret history of the Mongols have to say on the matter? Not much. The secret history of the Mongols was, or whoever the writer was not terribly impressed by the person of Shah Muhammad because he is effectively entirely forgotten in the work and just merged with his son, Sultan Jalal-ad-Din. And the massacre is described in 2 lines saying, Sultan Jalal-ad-Din killed our merchants with Ukuna at the head, sort of thing. And because of this, we had to invade Khwarezm. Not hugely detailed, but this just sort of shows just the possibilities available for Mongolian studies, that we can compare all of these sources across different languages, some across quite a wide geographic expanse, to discuss the same event and provide slightly different details or a similar account from each of them. So, history is very exciting, guys. Can't you see? Alright. Wiedersehen. I've had enough talking. My voice hurts.